I feel unusually calm about the very real threat of Indiana upsetting Oregon.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Plenty of you confident about this game against Indiana, who pose a very real challenge I'll talk about later on the show. Some thoughts on the schedule. Trivia returns on a Tuesday. This episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Top 10 showdown. Game day in town. And I know Indiana's good. I've watched them all year. I've talked about them over on Locked On College Football. I was really impressed with the way they played against Illinois. I think fundamentally my confidence stems from the fact that Illinois was physically dominated up front by Indiana. That led to the 63-10 beatdown that they gave them a couple of weeks ago in Bloomington. That was a home game for Indiana. And then last time out, I should say, the Hoosiers went on the road to play Iowa, who's got a much better defense. And Iowa was better in the trenches, particularly with their defensive line. And Indiana struggled to consistently score points. Now, Iowa couldn't score points on Indiana because, number one, the Hoosiers have a good team defensively, and number two, Iowa's offense is still just a JV operation. Oregon's, we know, is not. And so the trench play, I think, is the root of my confidence. My everydayers out there know, appreciate you for being that, by the way. My everydayers out there know, sometimes I look on the pessimistic side of things because sometimes I'm just a pessimistic fan. I can be that way sometimes. I know it. I come on here and tell you what I think, whether you like it or not. I knew Oregon could beat Penn State, but did I get into that camp mentally? Nope. And then they did. If you can go toe-to-toe with Penn State in the trenches, I think you can go toe-to-toe with Indiana. And my guy Jacob Goins, who you will hear from later this week, I promise, over in Locked On Hoosiers, has discussed the idea, you can go hear his words on it, that maybe Oregon isn't as good as people think because Penn State just lost to UCLA. As I talked about in yesterday's show, I don't feel that way. I think that Oregon game broke Penn State mentally, and they were not ready to play against the Bruins because they were still thinking about how they couldn't get it done against the Ducks. So the root of my confidence is that Oregon's offensive line has played very well. The defensive line has played very well too. Now, I'm not the only one that feels good at this point in time. Nick sends this one in. Hi, Spencer. So, SSA, that's Spencer's scale of agreement. Of course, if you're new here, allow me to briefly explain. You send a take with Spencer's scale of agreement, or SSA for short, and I give you 1 to 10 how much I agree with it, and I explain my reasoning. SSA, the Ducks need to lay it on against Indiana to prove they are as good as we think in the aftermath of the Penn State-UCLA game. 2. I think that is a 2. If Oregon loses on Saturday by a field goal, if they get blown out, which I just can't see happening, if they were to lose by a field goal on Saturday, I'd say Indiana is as good as I thought, and Oregon just didn't play well enough to win. Barring a dramatic set of circumstances, that would be my takeaway. It would not be, Indiana exposed Oregon. No, that would require Indiana blowing the Ducks out. Anybody think that's happening? Anybody? I think there's a greater likelihood Oregon wins by double digits than Indiana. I'll say that, though I think Indiana is a good team. This is not a Hoosier squad that is to be trifled with, but no, I don't think that from a perception standpoint, because of Oregon's preseason top 10 ranking, because of the brand they have and how much that matters in the College Football Playoff Committee's selection criteria, as we've seen over the years, I don't think that they have to go out, beat Indiana by 20 for people to, Oregon's good. I'm sure there are some people that feel that way. I don't think the most important people in college football who you would concern yourself with from a playoff standpoint, I don't think that they're going to look at Oregon that way. I really don't. Here's another one. Dana White's burner says, I assume this is for SSA. It wasn't in there, but I'm making it that one anyway. Oregon beats Indiana by 20 or more. They take the number 1 spot in the country. Side note, my prediction, 48-14 Oregon. Whoa. If Oregon wins this game 48-14, Jacob Goins will block my phone number. He won't talk to me ever again. I'll be too obnoxiously giddy. That's what that would come down to. So, yeah, if that were to happen, would Oregon jump Ohio State and Miami? Probably. Miami's on a bye this week. That can apparently result in you falling in the AP poll. Ohio State does play at Illinois. I don't know if they'd get, but if it were 48-14 and Ohio State wins close, yeah, they could. So let me split these up. If Oregon wins by 20 or more, I'll put it at a 6 that they become the number 1 team in the country. Whether or not we think that's good is a different conversation. But Oregon beating Indiana by 20 or more, man, I think the Hoosiers are too good for that. Not that I don't think Oregon could win by anywhere from 10 to 17 points, which is probably where I'll end up coming down. But that's a 2.5. 2.5 that they could win by 20 or more. I told you I wasn't the only one that feels this way. Here's one from Tyler. SSA. Oregon blows out Indiana this week at home, 3 scores or more. National media will predict this game closer than it should be. Most will pick Indiana to at least cover due to what Indiana did against Illinois a few weeks ago, Penn State losing to UCLA. I saw Iowa push around Indiana in the trenches last week, fact check true, and Oregon demoralized Penn State, which led to Penn State having a letdown against UCLA, fact check true. Even Coach Franklin said the game didn't take the loss well against Oregon in his post-game presser. Oregon 34, Indiana 17. What say you? My score prediction will come later in the week. I have to let these things formulate. You know, it's like making ribs or putting something in the crock pot. It's got to be there for a little while, you know, or preparing a brisket. You can't rush perfection. And I don't know if I've had a perfect Oregon score prediction. Illinois was the closest I think I've come last year. I had it 38-10, and Brett Bielema went for 2. And it was 38-9. Could I see a game like that? Boy, I'd be darn impressed. And look, Oregon surpassed my expectations and impressed me and the rest of the country once before. A 34-17 score. Yeah, the Hoosiers' defense, I think, poses a real challenge. I think the offense is more challenging for a couple different reasons. I'll talk about that later on today's show. But, you know, a score in the 34-17 range, I'd put that at a 5. I think in that sort of, I think it's reasonable. I really do. And that's because Oregon's at home. Oregon's been playing very well. We know how talented they are. And there's nothing really to not like about this Oregon team. So drop your thoughts in the comments below. How confident are you feeling going into this game against Indiana? Stoked that game day is in town. Wish I could be there and enjoy it with you guys. Unfortunately, I cannot, but your reaction show will be timely on Saturday. That I can promise you. So Indiana does pose a legitimate test for Oregon. 2 groups in particular are going to get another measuring stick moment. First, this episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections. That's it. That simple. Like Josh Allen passing yards. Over, he's going off. Saquon Barkley, rushing yards. Under, nope, he's getting held in check. However you're feeling about guys, PrizePicks lets you put your knowledge to the test. Plus, you can make your lineup in under a minute. It is that quick. It is that easy to make football season that much more exciting. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Let's talk about the Indiana Hoosiers. Fernando Mendoza coming back to Autzen Stadium. In 2023, with the California Golden Bears in a Pac-12 matchup, RIP, Mendoza came to town on a wet day. By the way, some rain in the forecast, but it never rains at Autzen Stadium, as we know. And it didn't go very well for Mr. Mendoza. He turned the ball over a couple times. Cal's offense struggled. Cal's defense struggled even more. This Indiana team is not that. He is definitely a better version of himself than he was at Cal, where he was a solid quarterback, and Oregon's defense that I don't think was as good 2 years ago as it is right now really made life difficult for him. That all fundamentally started, think back to the interception in the red zone or strip sack or anything like that. It all started up front. And again, I go back to what I mentioned earlier. The reason I feel pretty confident about Oregon going into this spot is that Iowa's defensive line pushed around Indiana's offensive line. And that was a big difference in the game. Now, Indiana ended up winning because they're better and Iowa can't play offense. Anybody think Oregon can't play offense? No. And what's the best unit on Oregon's defense? The defensive line. That just had its best game of the year against Penn State. They stopped the run and they stopped the pass. They were good situationally. They did everything that you could have possibly wanted. That was on the road. Now they're going to have Autzen behind them. It's a daytime kickoff. I think that part stinks because the Rutgers game is going to be a day game as well. I hope Autzen has at least a couple night games this year. Like the USC game, please be at night. That should be a night game. It's a different look, different vibe, different feel. But here's on each side of the ball, the groups I think that get tested the most. So let me start with the secondary for Oregon here. I love this secondary. It's hard to not. I thought I might like them this year and we might see some mistake. Nope. Coaching staff has been really good. They're getting a serious test this week. Serious test. If you rank the Big Ten quarterbacks right now, Fernando Mendoza is well above Drew Aller. Their passing game, Joel Klatt was critical of the way their receivers played against UCLA, and the receivers, of course, didn't do anything against this Oregon secondary. This group of Ducks DBs is going to get their biggest test of the year. Not just in Elijah Surratt, but really the system that Indiana runs. A lot of RPO, which is something Mendoza's familiar with going back to his time at Cal. He ran a bunch of RPOs. He's very good at them, and he makes a lot of really good reads. He makes a lot of really good throws. And I think the best play that Indiana runs consistently, the one that they torched Illinois with time and again, is what you'd call a glance route or a post or a skinny post. There's all different sorts of verbiage and whatnot, but that's what Oregon's DBs, I think, need to be prepared for, because this Indiana team can run the ball. We'll hear more about their ground game later this week from Goins when he gets on the show, but Elijah Surratt is the best individual wide receiver that Oregon has seen this year, by far. He would be the number one guy at Penn State, and I don't need to tell you that he'd be the number one guy on any of Oregon's first four opponents. It's not particularly close. Elijah Surratt is an NFL receiver who is a big-bodied guy that can catch the ball at all three levels, does everything really well. He's really dangerous in these RPO situations, and that's going to be a legit test for Oregon's secondary. I'm curious to see how they defend it, because do you want to have your defense really key in on stopping the run and set up those one-on-ones, or do you want him to drop back? Or I'm interested to see how the tactical strategy works out there for Dan Lanning. But the secondary, no doubt, because of Mendoza's ability to not just do that. I'm not saying that's all he does. He's not a one-trick pony back there. He can make a lot of throws on the field. But that, I think, is when Indiana's been the most explosive. They run the ball. They bring up the linebackers on the RPO. They run the glance route behind, and they hit it for a big play. So that's when they've been particularly dangerous, throwing the ball over the middle of the field. Kind of reminds me of the San Francisco 49ers offense in a way. That's going to be a big-time test for the secondary. And then on the other side, the reason they dominated Illinois was the defensive line. Luke Altmaier was running for his life. The Hoosiers held Illinois to 2 rushing yards. That included sack yardage, but again, 2 rushing yards. Indiana also ran for 320 in that game. 2. 2 rushing yards. The defensive line is good. Kurt Cignetti's a really good head coach. I think by the way, his comments this week are what we're going to call the anti-Mike Gundy, just giving Oregon absolutely positively no fuel. And we'll see how Dan Lanning motivates his guys this week. Hopefully we get to learn, because that means Oregon wins. Obviously no Ducks versus them when Oregon loses. But Cignetti's offense has been really impressive over the last couple of seasons, and so I think that's what most people think of when they visualize Indiana football having success. This defense is good. This defense has got some guys, like if you just go watch them on film, and I think they're impressive, particularly up front. That's how they controlled the game. It's how any defense wants to control the game, is at the line of scrimmage. So here's another test for Oregon's offensive line, which passed with flying colors against Penn State. And as a test for the secondary against Penn State, again, more than passing grades, exemplary performances in that matchup. That's going to be required again. So I'm most interested to watch those 2 groups to see, hey, when you've got Elijah Surratt and a good couple of receivers, how does the secondary match up? When you've got a legit NFL guy over there and a good quarterback as well, who could also be an NFL quarterback, according to some. Not me, but some. And on the other side, how does that offensive line hold up, again, against a legit front 4? Can they run the ball like they did against Penn State? Are they protecting Dante Moore? Interested to see how all that stuff plays out. But those are the biggest tests I think Oregon will get this weekend. So, speaking of the game, got another SSA here from Brutus's dad. SSA, I assume that's a dog name? With the forecast of 55 and raining, the Ducks will dominate the ground game both offensively and defensively due to better trench play. I feel better about Oregon's play up front on both sides because of the last games that these teams played. Now, sometimes trends reverse themselves in games, but boy, I've been impressed with the offensive line. I love the defensive line. Dominate the ground game. I mean, let's define dominant. Let's say 100 yards or more, they outgain them. So Indiana runs for 140, Oregon goes for 240. I don't think that's inconceivable. I think it's going to be harder to run for 140 than it will be to hold them to 140 on the ground in that statistical hypothetical. So I'm going to put that at 5.5. 5.5. Because again, I do feel good about what Oregon will bring to the table up front. But yeah, if it is wet, ball control and protecting it will be at a premium. But yeah, if it comes to, I think there are a lot of different ways that Oregon go about beating you. And though I know Indiana's a really good team, I do think Oregon is better. Did you think I was done taking questions about James Franklin? Nope, absolutely not. Also, trap games. What a fun phrase, right? 2 to keep an eye on. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. College football is back. Austin Stadium will be full again this Saturday. I couldn't be more excited. You couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy, it's all there. But you don't want to have to go through a hassle just to get to the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why you want to use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I literally used Game Time last week because I realized, wait, I'm going to be in Las Vegas. Oh my gosh, John Mulaney's in town? Yeah, he is. And I love John Mulaney. So I go on Game Time. I look to see what tickets are available. I found a deal with a great view, which of course they show you right up front. You know exactly what to expect. No hidden fees. I saved hundreds of dollars compared to what I would have paid on other ticketing services. I know. I looked. I was like, well, wonder what this would cost over there. Yeah, literally saved hundreds of dollars to go see one of my favorite comedians. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots, they probably run on Square. And you don't realize necessarily that you've used Square many times, but you have, because it's the way that is the easiest to get your financial transactions done. There are certain businesses that make the neighborhood the neighborhood, the places that become an extension of home, whether it's the sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, the spot with the best wings in town on game day, or that beloved local chain that's been rooted in your community for years. The businesses are what bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. No one wants to go digging into their wallet. No one wants to have software that doesn't work. You want to have that ease of process at checkout. Square helps provide that. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. All right, this question came from Bud, a little bit more Penn State fallout here. There's no such thing as too much. Who's asking my thoughts about the fact that each year James Franklin's buyout decreases by $8 million and how that would factor into, when they might make a change. And inevitably, if that were to happen, Will Stein's name would get thrown around. And I don't think any Oregon fan out there would say, don't take the Penn State job, it's a horrible situation. I mean, the criticism for years has been it's Franklin, not the school, right? Kind of seems like that's the case. So I think $8 million a year is something. I don't know that it's making a difference. If Penn State really wants to, if they really, really want to move on from James Franklin, they'd have to miss the playoff this year. If Penn State wins out, they still control their own path to get to the playoff, by the way. They go 10-2 with wins over Indiana and at Ohio State. They're in the college football playoff, even with a horrifically bad loss to UCLA last week. But with $8 million a year, look, even at the highest levels, many millions of dollars is still a legitimate consideration for an athletic department. I think the biggest thing that you have to consider when talking about buyouts is when is it owed? Does it have to get paid up front or can it be paid over time? Texas A&M is still paying Jimbo Fisher, even though Mike Elko is going into year 2. They're going to pay Jimbo Fisher for several years. They're going to do it a little at a time. Before Kalen DeBoer figured things out at Alabama a couple weeks ago against Georgia, people were talking about what's his buyout structure. They could pay him like $1 million a year for many years, and well, that's not that punitive because your funding as a college athletic department changes on a year-to-year basis depending on how much money you raise and how much money comes in from various sources like media rights deals. So is $8 million a year is noticeable, but if they have a serious desire, it's not a 1-year sum of money. What I mean by that is if they really want to get rid of him, they're not going to wait for it to go down $8 million. I think 10 would probably be the threshold of we don't want to pay another 10. I think anything in the single digits, if you really want to get rid of a coach, you'll suck it up and not wait another year and waste another season. But frankly, I don't think James Franklin's going to get fired. I think he should if he doesn't get them to the playoff this season. That's a national championship caliber roster. You swap the head coaches on Saturday night or September 27th in Happy Valley, and Penn State's undefeated, number 2 in the country, looking to win the national championship. 100%. So Tashi sends this one in. After the Penn State game, what is the trap game? Iowa, I watched the USC game and the Hoosier game. They are not that good. I mean, let's define not that good. Both are ranked in my top 25 over Locked On College Football. Indiana's inside the top 5. Lucas Oil Field looks like a good football field, but it is an away game for the Ducks. I mean, that's where they play the Big Ten championship game on if Oregon were to get there. So I assume that's what you're referring to. Anyway, trap game. Yeah, Iowa definitely fits the bill because it's just it's a tough environment. It's a pretty long road trip. Teams going multiple time zones, as Penn State learned. I guess we've seen over the last couple seasons why the big boys in college football haven't wanted to come out west very often for non-conference games. Hasn't gone very well for them a lot of the time. So anyway, I was up there. I don't know if there's like a true trap game. Let me just throw this out there. Just gonna again, trap game. Not this team could do. Rutgers is going to be played in Piscataway, New Jersey. that could be Oregon's UCLA game, is all I'm saying. If for some reason Dan Lanning can't get the guys ready to go or they don't take them seriously, that's a long trip. It's actually a pretty good fan base over there. So, the crowd can get on top of you and be pretty loud. But, yeah, I don't think there's like a traditional trap game spot. Like Penn State, I think you avoided that against Oregon State because you were at home. And because your team is just so much better than the Beavs, that would have been a more traditional trap game. Rivalry with a look-ahead factor, yeah, that happens a lot in college football. That is not something, as we saw with, what Franklin said coming out of the Oregon game, this is not something that, media folks like me are just making up. Like, it happens all the time where a team is just clearly not thinking about the opponent in front of them. And Oregon wasn't thinking about Oregon State for the first half. They were thinking about Penn State. And you know what? They were so much better, that's okay. But, yeah, I'd say the biggest, whoa, watch out for that game matchup this year that doesn't immediately jump off the page. Like, USC's a good team. Washington's a solid team. We know Indiana's really good, and they'll be tough this weekend. But, yeah, I'd say Iowa or Rutgers just because they're long trips. And, Rutgers isn't horrible. They're just not that good. Iowa's not horrible. They're just not that good. UCLA is horrible, and Penn State lost to them. So, anyway. All right, let's close the day with some Tuesday trivia. I do this on one day of the week during the season. Once the off-season's back, I might go back to doing this every day. We'll see. But that's a long ways away. I like having games. I love having college football games to talk about. So, I got last week's right about Oregon's original colors being blue and yellow. Here's one. What college program currently has the most starting quarterbacks in the NFL today? Also, who is second/third, and why could they be considered to be a tie for that second/third place? I'm going to try to not overthink this, which when I watch Jeopardy happens all the time. And I do it, the contestants do it. A really simple answer comes about. I believe this, and they just kind of go, wait, how did we not get that? Oh, overthought that. Anyway, I'm pretty sure the answer is Oregon. That's got. Did Mariota? Well, hold on. Let me double check. No, I can't do that. I Mariota was going to start, but I feel like I saw Jaden Daniels playing for the Commanders over the weekend. I didn't keep track. But anyway, Dylan Gabriel started, Justin Herbert started, Bo Nix started, and Mariota was maybe going to start. He started last week. So if you go with like a Tiger Slam timeline of the week before to the next week, then yeah, Oregon had 4 starters. But the second or third teams that are tied, it's got to be Alabama and Oklahoma, because Oklahoma's got Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield, and then Jalen Hurts is an Oklahoma grad. That's the school he finished at, but he also played at Alabama, so that's gotta be the tie for second and third that you're talking about in there. So that's my answer, is that Oregon is number 1, and then it's Oklahoma and Alabama tied for second and third. That's Tuesday Trivia. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And go Ducks.